Season 2 of Snowpiercer picks up right where Season 1 left off, with the members of Snowpiercer inside begging Alex to restart the train. The longer it sits there, the colder it gets, but instead of restarting the train, Alex gives them a list of items that she needs, and they have 12 minutes to get it, or else it's going to be too cold for them to ever move again. So Layton and the group jump into action to get everything on the list. And the last item on the list is Mr. Wilford's favorite bottle of scotch, which Miss Audrey just happens to have a bottle of in her safe. But right before she hands it over to Layton, she tells him, "This is just the beginning. Mr. Wilford's going to take everything we just fought for." But Layton doesn't have enough time to weigh the pros and cons of this thing. Now, while the passengers of Snowpiercer were getting the items, Ben and Javi were up front trying to figure out if they can get the train restarted. And the problem is, Mr. Wilford has complete control of Snowpiercer. They're able to finally get in touch with Melanie, who is still stuck outside, and she lets him know that she's at the connector, but they say, "You can't disconnect the trains." And she goes, "No, I'm aware of that. We drained the banks too low running from them to ever get moving on our own again," which is something that Bennett warned her about, and she apologizes for. But she also knows that if she's able to break the uplink, she'll be able to get the life systems and some of the helm back. So it's a start. And she starts Paul Bunyaning this thing, taking an axe to it. And after a few whacks, she's able to kill the uplink. Shortly after that, though, the train starts moving again because Alex came back for the items, along with this big, huge white dude that's kind of like Mr. Wilford's version of the Mountain from Game of Thrones. He's terrifying looking. Everyone's freaked out by him. But Alex and this guy grab all the items, go back to Big Alice, which is the train that Mr. Wilford's on, and close the door. So when the train gets started, Melanie is actually underneath it. And she sticks a detonation charge in one particular spot, and she's able to roll out underneath the tracks. And Ben is yelling at her to get back on the train, but all she can focus on as she's laying in the snow is this one snowflake that hits her suit. And she says to him, "I think it's snowing." And Javi is convinced that she's going crazy, but she's dead serious. She truly believes it's snowing, which is impossible because Ben tells her it's too cold to snow. He starts pleading with her to get up and get on the train, and then she realizes, yeah, I probably should do that. It is moving. But before she hops on, she grabs a snow sample, and she's able to hop on the last car, which is Big Alice. She lets Ben know that she's on. A voice comes over a loudspeaker and tells her to take her suit off to disinfect. And as she's taking her suit off, you see she's dealing with frostbite, especially on her shoulder, after her suit was punctured. After disinfecting, she changes into a maintenance man-like outfit, and she walks out where two crew members of Big Alice are waiting for her. One is named Kevin, and he actually knows Melanie Cavill. The other is named Sykes. Melanie has no idea who she is. But Kevin is so pissed off that Melanie once left him for dead that he hits her with a cattle prod. He then takes her up to meet Mr. Wilford. And when Melanie gets up there, Mr. Wilford's dog is actually the first one to greet her. But it's not long before Mr. Wilford reveals that he's sitting far back in the car. First thing he asks her is who she has up in the front driving his train. And she refuses to answer it, although he's pretty sure that it's Ben. She tries to change the subject, though, saying, "How'd you do it? I mean, how did you drop in on us in Chicago? I know you're dying to tell me." And he reveals that after she left them, he got Big Alice to idle. And by the time Snowpiercer was on the other side of the world, he had outfitted Big Alice. He tells her how he was always working and was just waiting for his moment to pounce, and that was it. She has figured out, though, that he must have taken a shortcut going over the test track of the Rocky Mountains. He agrees to tell her everything if she just hands over the keys, but she says, "I'm not going to do that." And he says, "Oh, yes you will. You might have caught my uplink, but I can still drop anchor. I can grind you guys to a halt." He tells her how he wants his train back, but she explains how, up until a few weeks ago, he was still, quote, running the train. People thought he was there. But after a Taylor revolution, she no longer has control of the train. It's not hers to give up anymore. But then in walks Alex, and this is the first time that Melanie is seeing Alex, and she is shocked to see that Alex is alive. Although Alex doesn't refer to her as Mom, she refers to her as Melanie. She tells Alex whatever this guy told you was a lie, and Alex kind of looks at her cross-eyed and says, "Which part was a lie? The part where you stole his train and left me for dead? How is that a lie?" And Melanie tries to explain how she sent people to pick up Alex and her grandparents, but those people never returned. She waited. And she has so much to tell her. But you can also see that Wilford has dug his claws into Alex and kind of poisoned her mind about Melanie Cavill. He gets Alex to change the subject, and she starts telling Wilford how their society in Snowpiercer is an absolute mess right now. It seems like some guy named Layton is in charge. She saw Brakeman Roach and the head of hospitality, Ruth. She didn't, however, see any jackboots. Kevin then comes in and asks if everybody's okay, and Alex says, "No, everything's not okay. Take Melanie to the brig." But it doesn't take long for Alex to go visit her mom, although it's not like she's had a real change of heart. She asks her mom, she asks Melanie what it's like outside because she hasn't been outside since she was a child, and Melanie tells her it's really cold. They have a conversation about how Alex remembers a little bit of the old world, but the train is their world now. Melanie then asks what happened with Alex and her grandparents, and she tells Melanie that her grandparents just didn't want to leave. They wanted to die there. And Alex didn't want to leave her grandparents. Melanie then tries to explain why she sent Alex away to live with her grandparents, but that's when Alex's mood shifts, and she said, yeah, I know why you did it. It's because you had a train to steal. But Melanie says no, it was to keep you from him, meaning Wilford. Although Alex points out that it was Wilford who was the one who saved her life. Alex then pulls out the vial of the snow sample and asks what it was, and Melanie tells her it was a snow sample. I haven't been outside of Snowpiercer in 7 years. But Alex is convinced that it's yet another lie from her mother, and she just walks off, leaving her mom in the brig. Now, over in Snowpiercer, they're locked out of Big Alice. Big Alice can come into Snowpiercer, but Snowpiercer can't go into Big Alice. And because of this, they need to fortify the tail, just in case Wilford attacks. Layton gives the order and then tells Ruth and a few others that he'll address the entire train after a council meeting in the night car. And at that meeting, Ben is the first one to speak. He tells everybody that while they have full engineering control at the moment, Big Alice is really nothing more than an anchor. They can drop it at any time. And while originally Big Alice was a supply train, there's really no way to figure out how it's been retrofitted. Ben figures it could fit 200 at the moment, but he does admit that that estimate is probably high. Ben's big concern, though, is the fact that Melanie is their prisoner. Although one of the members of First Class says that they're done fighting. They don't want another war. And Layton knows that's true. He knows that they need rest and time to regroup. But Ruth tries to get everybody to calm down, saying they haven't invaded yet. We need to chill. She thinks there's a chance that Melanie is on Big Alice while they're having this meeting, working things out with Wilford and Alex. But Audrey points out that Mr. Wilford isn't interested in just controlling the train. He wants to control everybody. And just to get order back in the car, Layton points out that Wilford does not control Snowpiercer. Snowpiercer controls Snowpiercer. And that little speech kind of gets everybody unified. But then he turns to Ruth, Till, and Roach and tells them that they're not going to start talks until Wilford gives Melanie back. Ruth then walks away, and Layton turns to Till and Roach and tells them that they need to get a force together and to keep Ruth out of it. Now, Till thinks it's a terrible idea because they have no idea what is behind that door. But Layton points out that they need to strike first before Wilford strikes. They need to do a preemptive attack to get Melanie back. He knows that Wilford has a plan, so Layton figures that he needs to hit Wilford before Wilford hits them. Now, Ruth isn't privy to this conversation, but she does notice that Zara is getting some flack from a couple of tailies upstairs and points it out to Layton. And when Layton goes upstairs to see what they're arguing about, it has to do with the fact that Zara gave up Josie, and they blame Zara for Josie's death. But Layton tells him that Zara was just reacting because Melanie was kind of holding her hostage. But even after that explanation, they still want justice for Josie, and that's when Zara tells them, hey, I'm pregnant. And that changes the mood. Ruth tells her that if she is pregnant, they need to get her uptrained because she's a target. A pregnancy on Snowpiercer is kind of a miracle. But some of these tailies aren't a big fan of Layton's new democracy. Ruth then takes both Layton and Zara to a first-class car that was previously owned by an old couple that took cyanide pills once the tailies broke through. She set them both up to be comfortable during the pregnancy. He tells her that it's not the best look that he's getting Zara this preferential treatment, but Ruth points out that she's pregnant. They have to. He then addresses the train, telling them that while it pains him to say it, they have to put the democratic experiment on hold for the moment and institute martial law. And that is a decision that does not go well with a lot of people, but Bennett points out what other choice does he have? Now, down at the tail, as they try to fortify it, Pike gets a knock at the door from somebody who is on Big Alice looking to trade weed for fruit. And that is a deal that is too good to pass up for my man Pike, so he quickly grabs a tangerine and an apple and trades it for the ganja. And as Layton and Roche are making their way down back to the tail, they smell the weed, and it doesn't take long for them to discover Pike blazing that shit up. But instead of getting angry at Pike, when he finds out how he got the weed, Layton now knows how they're going to get into Big Alice. Now, back in Big Alice, Alex told the doctors there that Melanie is dealing with frostbite. So they handcuff her, they put a bag on her head, and they bring her down to get patched up. And the two doctors, who were named the Headwoods, immediately recognize Melanie, and Melanie actually recognizes them. And they're a little eccentric. They're kind of weird, but they do end up getting her patched up and put this ointment on her frostbite, which they say, once it heals, you won't even be able to tell it was ever there. She then needs to get ready because she's having dinner that night with Wilford. And as they're eating, they start reminiscing about starting this whole train together. But that's when Wilford gets word that Snowpiercer breached the door. And it really didn't take much effort. Pike knocked on the door and told him that he was willing to trade more food for drugs, and it was actually Kevin who agreed to it. And once they opened the door, Snowpiercer's group burst on through and started making their way up Big Alice. So when Wilford finds out, he tells Sykes to send in Icy Bob. And Icy Bob was that mountain-esque guy that we saw earlier. And when he shows up, it is bad news for the Snowpiercer group. He starts throwing people around. He also pulls a lever that makes it about 70 below zero in the car. So not only are they getting their ass kicked, they're freezing on top of it, and it forces them to back up. Although as Icy Bob is walking through it, you realize why he got that nickname, because the low temperature isn't even affecting him. Before he closed the door in the group, he flips them off, and then he closes the door. Now, there's one person that's really pissed off at Layton for making this push into Big Alice, and it's Ruth. He tells her not to take it personal, but she says, "How can I not take it personal? You saw it fit to tell the engine, but you didn't see it fit to tell hospitality." He tells her that they didn't lose any ground, and in fact, they got what they came for, which is a prisoner, and that prisoner is Kevin. Kevin warns them, though, that this is a big mistake. Wilford doesn't care if you die. He can restart everything. And it might be a big mistake, because over in Big Alice, Wilford is pretty pissed off that they took a prisoner and think that that's going to work. And finally, all that anger that he's been bottling up inside flows out of him. He yells at Melanie for trying to steal his train when he, quote, built the world. He brings up the fact that he saved her from a little podunk farm, and he made her what she is today. But the big disagreement that they have is the fact that Wilford thinks that the new world is the train, and Melanie thinks that the world is the world. She says there's no solution until we can figure out how to go back outside. He then drags her to the engine room of Big Alice, where Alex is sitting in the cockpit because she is an engineer now. And he tells Alex to bring Snowpiercer to a halt, which she does. And over at Snowpiercer, Javi and Bennett are worried that if he disconnects, they're dead, because they know that they can't restart the train again, and they're just going to freeze to death. Wilford warns Melanie that if she can't get Layton to give up the train, then they're just going to disconnect, go in reverse, and by the time they come back, everybody on Snowpiercer is going to be dead, and it'll be Melanie Cavill's job to compost all of her dead friends. But giving up the train isn't Melanie's call, so Wilford instructs Alex to disconnect, and Melanie starts pleading with her daughter not to do it because it's not the right thing to do. All those innocent people are going to die on board. She tells Alex that Snowpiercer is their future. They need it to survive. But Alex ends up giving into the bullying of Wilford and presses the button. And when she does that, there's a big explosion, because that detonation charge that Melanie put under the train when she was outside of it, well, it goes off. She had planned this whole thing out. She knew that this might happen. And when that detonation charge went off, it connected the two trains. They cannot disconnect. Even Alex is impressed with this plan, but Wilford, he's livid. He realizes that the only option they have is to get Snowpiercer back up and running, or else everybody dies. So he reluctantly gives the order, and some people on Snowpiercer, mainly Kevin, say, "Oh, thank God, he spared us." But Layton looks at him and says aloud, "We're in for a long, cold war." Thanks for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Like the video if you liked it. Hit thumbs down if you don't. Be nice in the comments section. Nasty comments hurt my feelings. I work hard on these. If I make a mistake, it happens. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen, it'll be up soon. Sharing is caring. Put it on your MySpace page or your away message. And check out my podcast, Scene Invaders, wherever you listen to podcasts.